Okay, Francis, go ahead.
Hello, friends. Welcome to this 34th webinar on the Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. Hopefully, we'll be joined in a few minutes by others. Looks like people are starting to come in. So, as you well know by now, this webinar series is available on Makara. What in the world am I doing on this slide? Hang on a sec. Should be up on this slide. Okay. There we go. Okay, so as you know, this series is available on Makara. And previous episodes of this and the Secret Doctrine series are also available on YouTube. And you just do a search for my name in the program you want. Okay, so what do we have here? Looks like we have about 7 of you. Okay, this is the paragraph we left off on last time. So let's reread it, and then we'll get into taking a closer look where we left off last time. So could we get a reader, please?
I'll start off. In the Egyptian drawings of him, Thoth carries a waxen writing tablet and serves as the recorder during the weighing of the souls of the dead in the judgment hall of Osiris, a ritual of great significance. Hermes is of first importance to Masonic scholars because he was the author of the Masonic initiatory rituals, which were borrowed from the mysteries established by Hermes. Nearly all of the Masonic symbols are Hermetic in character. Pythagoras studied mathematics with the Egyptians, and from them gained his knowledge of the symbolic geometric solids. Hermes is also revered for his reformation of the calendar system. He increased the year from 360 to 365 days, thus establishing a precedent which still prevails. The appellation thrice greatest was given to Hermes because he was considered the greatest of all philosophers, the greatest of all priests, and the greatest of all kings. It is worthy of note that the last poem of America's beloved poet, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, was a lyric ode to Hermes.
Okay, so any thoughts about this? So this is where we left off last time. Nearly all the Masonic symbols are Hermetic in character. So let's take a look at Gerald Massey's writings on this. He did a deep comparative study of the relationship between Egyptian and Masonic symbolism. Reveals a lot about both sides. So could we get a reader, please?
Okay, first, Yvonne's got her hand up.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Yvonne.
Okay, Francis, why was it 360 days?
It was a lunar cycle, and actually at that time, they their best calculations put that as the return of the same time each year. And when they added 5 days, they actually made all 5 of those days ceremonial days or festival days. That they had them at the end of the year. That very much like our solar, our winter solstice, right? And so they added these 5 festival days, and of course it was Hermes' higher awareness that made him know that this was the actual length of the year. You know, he really was a a great master. So yeah, that's really all I can say on that. But yeah. Any other questions? Okay, let's go ahead.
Oh, Yvonne, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I wanted to tell you I muted you. When Francis is responding to you, please keep yourself muted because we were getting some feedback there. But anyway, Yvonne, would you please read?
Sure. The mysteries of Masonry are founded on the two truths of the goddess Mot, who survives in them even by her name. How few newly made Masons but go away from their initiation, imagining that the word communicated with mouth to ear and at low breath, has some connection with the marrow and the bone. What do they know of that mystical personage known to some adepts as the Venerable Ma? This question is asked and left unanswered in Isis Unveiled by an initiate in various mysteries. The essential idea of Masonry is that of a company of brotherhood of builders working under the master architects, just as the company of the seven Kanenmu work under direction of Ta and Ma. Ta being the artisan who built the truth, that is with Mot. The seven Numu are their operatives. Egypt will re-identify Masonry as a mystic craft with foundations in facts that go beyond the religious mysteries of the Hebrews, Romans, or Greeks. Here, for example, is Masonry. An Egyptian scribe addresses the gods as the Nutru, who test by their level, the Mason's level, the words of men. The Lord of law, not hail to you, ye gods, ye associate gods.
Okay, and next up, reader, please.
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
A mason in Egyptian is a Mach, and Ma'at has an earlier form in Mach for rule and measure. Sen denotes a brother or brotherhood. Sen means to fraternize. Thus derived, the mason or Mach-sen would be the brother mason of the craft, and the fraternity would be that of Ma'at, not only as masons, but as that of truth. The Masonic Brotherhood is founded on truth as one of its primordial tenets, and Ma'at is truth. The initiate is instructed to be true and trusty, and is consecrated to the truth, which alone is immutable and eternal. This truth was first founded and expressed by the stone squarers and polishers in the typology and language of building. Hence the symbols, the square, compasses, and the other Masonic emblems. One sign worn by Ma'at is the ostrich feather, which denotes both light and shade, or black and white. The Masons likewise wear a suit of black with white aprons, gloves, stockings, and sometimes white shoes, which are the exact equivalent of the feather of light and shade worn by the goddess Ma'at. In their processions, the Masons always walk two and two, and Ma'at is dual. Sen means tool, two.
Okay, and one more page. Or maybe I didn't put a transcription. Anyway, next.
Karen, can you read that for us, please?
The eye is one of the Masonic signs. In Egyptian, Mahat is the eye, and the word also signifies seeing. The hand is proffered in greeting to make the peculiar sign of the brotherhood, and the hand extended to offer and give is an ideograph of Mahat. The hands crossed and making the circle of the mystic chain form another hieroglyphic of Mahat or Ma, the cross loop, tie, wreath, or crown. Masons read the 24-inch rule as a sign of the 24 hours or day and night. The 24-hour inch rule represents 2 feet, and 2 feet in Egyptian read mati, a pair of foot soles, as well as the 2 truths of Mahat, the 2 truths that were the basis on which all stood. The pair of shoes occasionally found with the pair of half-open compasses on the tombs of Masons in Rome are the same symbolically as the pair of feet on the ancient stones of Britain and Ireland and in Polynesia or other parts of the world, and these may be interpreted by their pair of feet or the footstep and the sole of the 2 lion gods of Egypt who kept the gates or divisions of the 2 solstices, north and south. The half-cross compasses which accompany them denote the midway of the equinoidal level.
Okay, thank you. And let's see if we have another one, or if that's it. No, that's it. I didn't cite it like I usually do. So any questions about Massey's description of the connections between Masonry and the ancient Egyptian? It's important because it really does bring forward some fundamental concepts that were part of the Egyptian religion, and it kept them alive and at work, even though heavily veiled in many cases. But okay then. Next. Pythagoras studied mathematics with the Egyptians, and from them gained his knowledge of the symbolic geometric solids. That in itself is quite a statement. So could we get a reader for this?
Andrea, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. Lambilcus says Pythagoras derived his information upon different sciences from Egypt. He learnt philosophy from the priests, and his theories of comets, numbers, and music were doubtless from the same source. But the great repugnance evinced by the Egyptian priests to receive Pythagoras will account for their withholding from him much what they knew, though his great patience and his readiness to comply with their regulations, even to the rite of circumcision, obtained for him more information than was imparted to any other Greek. Clemens says Pythagoras was the disciple of Sanchez, the Egyptian arch-prophet, and he repeats Plato's story of the Egyptian priest saying, "Salon, Salon, you Greeks are always children," which shows what the general belief was among the Egyptians and Greeks, respecting the source of knowledge in early times. Stratbo affirms that the Greeks did not even know the length of the year till Eudoxus and Plato went to Egypt in 370 BC. Manners and Customs of the Ancient Egyptians, Volume 2, page 316.
Yeah, so any thoughts about this? Even to the rite of circumcision, now that's commitment, right? You can get some sense of how evolved the Egyptian priesthood was in terms of their doctrine by the fact that Pythagoras, who was the best and brightest of the Greeks, was still met with great reticence here. He probably had to prove himself to these priests. And of course, the unwritten story would be much more interesting than what has come down to us. But anyway. Okay, next up.
Francis?
Yeah.
Yvonne's got her hand up. Go ahead, Yvonne.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Pythagoras here, wasn't he Master Katumi? Isn't he Master Katumi?
Does anybody know the answer? Scott, do you know whether he was Kudhumi? I thought it was, there's.
I believe so.
That's, yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, I'm not sure if DK says it directly or if it's been extrapolated.
I'll look it up. I have Philip Lindsay's book, The Masters and Their Incarnations. I'll look it up.
Yeah, check it
Yeah,
out.
I'm pretty sure that DK didn't say that, but I do believe that that's what Michael and Philip and some other scholars in DK surmised. And it could be that they found it in some unpublished documents.
Yeah, I'd be very interested if you do track that down. Oh, by the way, Yvonne, the other thing about the 360-day year is that it evenly divides the 12 months into 30 days per month.
Okay. Why don't we do that now?
Do what?
30
Oh,
days.
do what? Oh, because you end up having a rotating year, and after a century, you have summer and winter. And so and because it doesn't, the actual cycle of the time it takes the Earth to travel around the sun is
Okay.
actually closer to 365. In fact, interestingly, not only is there a leap day every fourth year, which is called leap year, let me see if I can speak English. Not only is there an extra day every 4 years, February 29th, there is also an extra day, an extra day every century, and that's February 30th. Every century on the day of on the 2000 or the 1000 or 1900, there is a February 30th, because that's what's needed to correct the calendar in terms of the rotation of the Earth around the sun.
Okay, so what did we do about that in the year 2000? We should have
There
had,
was a February 30th.
was there?
Yeah.
I don't remember that. I'm sorry.
So well, who would?
Thank you.
So if you're born on February 30th, then you'll live to be 400,000 years old, because you only age once every century instead of once every year. It's a well-known fact. Okay. All nonsense aside, let's see here. What's next? Okay. So next up, Hermes is also revered for his reformation of the calendar, which we've been talking about. He increased the year, establishing the precedent that still prevails. And here's is an actual drawing of the Egyptian calendar. I also have a bas relief here, but let's go back here. If we could get a reading for this, maybe we'll learn a little more about this.
Okay, but first Scott's got his hand up.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Scott.
I've always thought that the difference between the 360 and 365 is a reflection of the fact that the planet is not a sacred planet, and that its circle is not circle, it's elliptical or ovoid. And so because of that, it's not exactly 360, the perfection.
Yeah, I like that. That sounds right. From an esoteric point of view. Do you remember reading that in DK at some point, or
No,
some?
I came up with that, I think.
Yeah, I like it because you have 360 degrees in a circle, so a perfect orbit would be 1 day per degree. So the 5 suggests that much out of whackedness, right? I like that. Yeah, that's neat. Okay, can we get a reader for this? Yeah, I think here he goes with the 30 days each.
Martha, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. The substitution of solar for lunar months was the earliest change in the Egyptian year. It was then made to consist of 12 months of 30 days each, making a total of 360 days. But as soon as it was discovered, as it was soon discovered that the seasons were disturbed and no longer corresponded to the same months, so 5 additional days were introduced at the end of the last month. Zorai, in order to remedy the previous defect in the calendar and to ensure the returns of the seasons to fixed periods. The 12 months were Thoth, Paupi, Athor, Choeak, Tobi, Mechur, Peamenoph, Farmuthi, Pachons, Paoni, Epep, and Mizori, with the year being divided into 3 seasons. Each period comprised 4 of these months, the manners and customs of the ancient Egyptians.
Okay, it's good to pay attention to these sources. This isn't a particularly esoteric source, manners and customs, but it's a very in-depth, accurate source in terms of its archaeology. So this is just the kind of place where it shines. So how'd you like to be born in the month of Tobi? You know, interesting breakdown here. In the 3 months, the 3 seasons, I wonder what they were, or what they would have been marked by. They were probably having to do with the inundation, you know. So, yeah, interesting stuff. And then here we have the Egyptian calendar in bas relief, another form of it. Okay, next up. The appellation thrice greatest was given to Hermes because he was considered the greatest of all philosophers, the greatest of all priests, and the greatest of all kings. This statement is borne out in a number of sources. The divine Pymander indicates the origins of the term. I'm a little suspect of this. It sounds exoteric to me, but since I can't give you what the true source of thrice greatest is, but I would suggest that it has to do with higher references, mastery over higher realities, rather than this. But it would have its exoteric counterpart, and this is probably correct in terms of that. So anyway, could we get a reader for this little short piece?
Jeremy, can you read that, please? Jeremy?
Is he unmuted?
No. Okay, Jan, can you read that, please?
Sure. On the Rosetta Stone, Hermes is called the Great and Great, or twice great. He was called Trismegistus, or twice great, according to the 12th aphorism of the Emerald Table, because he possessed 3 parts of the wisdom of the whole world.
Yeah, I think we may be getting a little closer to the truth with this 3 parts of the wisdom, but that doesn't necessarily mean outer disciplines, though that would be the blind. It's just my opinion. Okay. And next, it is worthy to note that the last poem of America's beloved poet, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, was a lyric ode to Hermes, his very last poem. Very well-known poet. Let's see, do we have Carrie with us today? I don't see him.
No, he isn't with us.
Oh, that's a shame.
I think he was under the weather when he returned from his trip. So.
Oh, okay. Well, you know what? I'm going to read this. It's worth the trouble. Because it gives the feeling sense to Hermes. So Hermes Trismegistus by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Still through Egypt's desert places flows the lordly Nile. From its banks, the great stone faces gaze with patient smile. Still the pyramids imperious pierce the cloudless skies, and the Sphinx stares with mysterious, solemn, stony eyes. But where are the old Egyptian demigods and kings? Nothing left but an inscription graven on stones and rings. Where are Helios and Hephaestus, gods of elder eld? Where is Hermes Trismegistus, who their secrets held? Where are now the many 100,000 books he wrote, by the thaumaturgus plundered, lost in lands remote, in oblivion, sunk forever, as when o'er the land blows the storm wind, in the river sinks the scattered sand. Something unsubstantial, ghostly, seems this Teurgist. In deep meditation mostly, wrapped as in a mist, vague, phantasmal, and unreal. To our thoughts he seems, walking in a world ideal, in a land of dreams. Was he one or many, merging name and fame in one, like a stream to which converging many streamlets run, till with gathered power proceeding, ampler sweep it takes, downward the sweet waters leading from unnumbered lakes. By the Nile I see him wandering, pausing now and then, on the mystic union pondering between gods and men, half believing, wholly feeling with supreme delight, how the gods themselves concealing lift men to their height. Or in Thebes, the 100-gated, in the thoroughfare breathing, as if consecrated, a diviner air, and amid discordant noises in the jostling throng, hearing far celestial voices of Olympian song. Who shall call his dreams fallacious? Who has searched or sought all the unexplored and spacious universe of thought? Who in his own skill confiding shall with rule and line mark the borderland dividing human and divine? Trismegistus, 3 times greatest, how thy name sublime has descended to this latest progeny of time. Happy they whose written pages perish with their lives, if amid the crumbling ages still their name survives. Thine, O priest of Egypt, lately found I in the vast, weed-encumbered, somber, stately graveyard of the past. And a presence moved before me on that gloomy shore, as a waft of wind that o'er me breathed and was no more. Wow. Okay. I could say thoughts or comments, but I think we'll just let it lie. So here's the title page of Chambers' Encyclopedia, proving again that something has been lost in modern book design. This is from 1871. All right. Next, could we get a reader, please? This is the first paragraph of a subsection called the Mutilated Hermetic Fragments. For some reason, during this section, MPH decided to divide the main chapter into subheadings, which he hasn't done before. But so could we get a reader, please?
Yes, Jeremy's going to read for us. But first, I just wanted to read what Scott put in the chat. He says, wow, what a final poem.
Yes, indeed. Really, he sure raises Longfellow in my estimation.
And then Yvonne's got her hand up too. So hold on just a minute, Jeremy. Go ahead, Yvonne.
Okay, I did find the part, this is in Masters of the Seven Rays, Their Past Lives and Reappearance by Philip Lindsay. It's on page 50, and it says, Pythagoras was a previous incarnation of Master KH.
Okay.
And also he went to Oxford in 1850, interesting.
Oh, well, in a later incarnation. Okay, that's interesting. You just taking nothing away from Philip Lindsay, who has devoted his life to this kind of study, just be aware of the difference between, DK material and pretty much anybody else. HPB and DK, you can consider that it is coming directly from a master of wisdom, from the master of wisdom's voice to their ear. Anybody else, it's derivative, and there may be some intuition involved, but just, be aware of that.
I think DK is easier to understand.
Well, yeah. And he does very occasionally talk about personages. HPB does quite a bit, but DK only occasionally talks about, such ones as Leonardo or Plato or and a few others. Okay, so reader, please.
Jeremy, you're up.
Okay. On the subject of the Hermetic books, James Campbell Brown, in his History of Chemistry, has written, leaving the Chaldean and earliest Egyptian periods of which we have remains, but no record, and from which no names of either chemists or philosophers have come down to us, we now approach the historic period when books were written not at first upon parchment or paper, but upon papyrus. A series of early Egyptian books is attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, who may have been a real savant or may be a personification of a long succession of writers. He is identified by some with the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian Thoth or Tuti, who was the moon god and is represented in ancient paintings as ibis-headed with the disk and crescent of the moon. The Egyptians regarded him as the god of wisdom, letters, and the recording of time. It is in consequence of the great respect entertained for Hermes by the old alchemists that chemical writings were called hermetic, that the phrase hermetically sealed is still in use to designate the closing of a glass vessel by fusion after the manner of chemical manipulators. We find the same root in the Hermetic medicines of Paracelsus and the Hermetic Freemasonry of the Middle Ages.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Jeremy. Any thoughts or questions on this paragraph, which is one long quote from Brown's History of Chemistry, begins by contrasting the period before and after the use of papyri. In 2013, 30 papyri were discovered that pushed the date for the earliest papyri so far found back another 500 years. But since these recently discovered papyri express a fully developed language, here's an early papyri listing 85 math problems. It suggests that the true beginnings of Egyptian writing is much earlier. Can we get a reader for this short description? This is, this shows a series of math problems as the scribe, I'll read it. The scribe of the Rhind mathematical papyrus, an Egyptian document more than 3,600 years old, introduces the roughly 85 problems by saying that he is presenting the correct method of reckoning for grasping of the meaning of things and knowing everything that is, obscurities, and all secrets. Makes you want to read it. Okay, so though hieratic script and hieroglyphs may have been introduced, many say by Hermes, between 4,500 and 3,200 BC, certainly other forms of writing existed before this, in, for example, Atlantis. On the other hand, we cannot discount the importance of the mental discipline arising from the oral tradition. In fact, Plato mentions Thoth in his dialogue, Phaedrus, to demonstrate that writing leads to laziness and forgetfulness. Okay, Next up, he is identified by some with the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian Thoth or Tuti, who was the moon god. Actually, the true moon goddess was Khonsu, who personified the light of the moon. Thoth was seen as a lunar god, primarily because he marked the progression of cycles. Here he is crowned with a lunar disk. Note all the sublunary symbols of duality, the two horns, feathers, and uraeuses, even two uraeuses. But at the summit of this crown, we find a solar disk, indicating his link with Mercury and also indicating his identity as an incarnation of the high god that sent him forth.
Francis?
Yeah.
Sorry. Efrosini says, I think the name Trismegistus, great, 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 can refer to the united in one person of three great titles of antiquity, the king, the priest, and the philosopher. Can, on the other hand, refer to a holy trinity.
I like that. Yeah, I mean, it's up in the air. I haven't run across any source material that directly describes its potential higher meaning. But the very fact that the one always initially divides into three suggests that at whatever level, mastery of the three is the means by which the one is realized. And so I think it is in that, as you say, the Holy Trinity, that we truly have the secret of his identity, right? I mean, the three, for instance, the integrated personality is the integration of the three lesser sheets, and it creates a unity of that. And then we have the trinity of the personality, soul, and monad, which when integrated, you become monadically conscious. So it's, the Trismegistus, I think, is a very, very high title indeed. Okay, see, where are we? Okay, so next, and is represented in ancient paintings as ibis headed with the disk and crescent of the moon. Here he is as described. I love this particular one. It's so dramatic. The posture, accoutrement, and headgear used when depicting the gods varied in order to emphasize some particular aspect. So this one would seem to be the union of this solar and lunar principles, which just an incarnating divinity is that duality inherently, right? So next up, this passage describes the use of the term Hermetic. Hermetic refers to any derivative of Hermetic philosophy, but modern usage has given the term different specific meanings. For example, Hermetic Masonry was introduced in the 18th century and is the focus of a Masonic degree called Adepts or Knights of the Eagle and the Sun. That's the 28th degree. Hermetic alchemists sought the original principle in all matter, which they called menstruum universal. Here's another detail of this engraving, which I find to be an extraordinary engraving. Some of these 19th century engravings were just over the top. So here are the two. Here you have the higher part, and you see these different qualities used in sorry. Yeah, you find the different qualities used in this discipline. And then you have, here the planets. And then you have this symbol here. You have this, I love this, the sun and the moon walking. This is like the fixed signs. It's just a really beautiful engraving.
Look at all the planets in the trees.
Yes, indeed. Yep. Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Venus, the Earth. And then you also have other signs. Here's Mercury, right? But you also have signs for sulfur, etc. Okay. So any questions on this fragment, on this passage? Okay, then. Next up, go we get a reader, please.
Tia, can you read that for us, please?
Among the fragmentary writings believed to have come from the stylus of Hermes are two famous works. The first is the Emerald Table, and the second is the Divine Pymander, or as it is more commonly called, the Shepherd of Men, a discussion of which follows. One outstanding point in connection with Hermes is that he was one of the few philosopher priests of whom pagandom, upon whom the early Christians did not vent their spleen. Some church fathers went so far as to declare that Hermes exhibited many symptoms of intelligence, and that if he had only been born in a more enlightened age, so that he might have benefited by their instructions, he would have been a really great man.
Oh, the hubris, huh? Unbelievable. Okay, thoughts or questions on this? So first, the reference to Hermes Trismegistus' two most renowned works, the Emerald Table or Tablet and the Divine Pymander. Earlier, we looked at a translation of the inscription found on the Emerald Tablet from Dr. Everard's book on the Divine Pymander. Let's now take a look at an analysis of these inscriptions from Hermetic Magic, the 4th chapter of Eliphas Levi's The History of Magic. So could we get a reader for this page, please?
Yes, but first, Janet says, she questions vent the spleen.
I'm sorry, vent the spleen? Was that?
Yeah, I think that was a reference to the prior passage that Tia just read.
Let's see here. Oh yeah, here, right. Oh, the few philosophers, priests, and pagan whom they really did not vent their spleen. Yeah, it's what's interesting because the spleen is the means by which we process prana, right? It comes through our etheric body into our spleen and then distributed. So, but venting one's spleen is a phrase that means remonstrating against, or speaking out against. So suggesting that, all the old pagan, which just means enlightened philosophers of old, were attacked by the church, but they didn't dare attack Hermes because he was so revered. So instead they just said, had he benefited from their instruction, he might have been a really great man, right? It tells more about the church than it does about Hermes, right? Okay, let's see where we were here. Yeah, okay.
All right. Hermetic magic. It is in Egypt that magic attains the grade of completion as a universal science and is formulated as a perfect doctrine. As a summary of all the dogmas which obtained in the ancient world, nothing surpasses and indeed nothing equals those few paragraphs graven on previous stone by Hermes. By Hermes and denominated the Emerald Tablet. Unity of being and unity in the harmony of things according to the ascending and descending scales, progressive and proportional evolution of the world, I can't read today, immutable law of equilibrium, and graduated progress of universal analogies, correspondence between the idea and its expression, providing a measure of likeness between creator and created, essential mathematics of the infinite, proved by the dimensions of a single angle in the finite. All this is expressed by the one proposition: that which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above, for the fulfillment of the wonders of the one thing. Hereunto are added the revolution and illuminating description of the creative agent, the pantomorphic fire, capable of assuming all shapes, the great medium of occult force. In a word, the astral light.
Okay, so astral didn't mean what astral means in DK speak. It meant basically all the unseen realms, not just the astral plane as we think of it. So clearly, Eliphas Levi really pondered on this concept of as above, so below. I just love his description of what that single phrase suggests, right? Unity of being and unity in the harmony of things. The proportional evolution of the word, immutable law of equilibrium. I mean, you can really see how what he derives from that really does trace its origin back to this simple statement, as above, so below. Okay, but there's more. Next up. Reader, please.
Scott, can you please read that?
Hermes goes on to set forth in what manner this light, which is also a force, can be applied as a lever, as an universal dissolvent, and as a formative and coagulative agent. How also this light must be extracted from the bodies in which it lies latent, in order to imitate all the artifices of nature by the aid of its diverse manifestations, as fire, motion, splendor, radiant gas, scalding water, or finally igneous earth. The Emerald Tablet contains all magic in a single page. The other works attributed to Hermes, such as the divine Pymander, Asclepius, Minerva of the world, etc., are generally regarded by critics as productions of the school of Alexandria. But they contain, notwithstanding, the Hermetic traditions which were preserved in the theurgic sanctuaries. For those who possess the keys of symbolism, the doctrines of Hermes can never be lost. Amidst all their ruin, the monuments of Egypt are as so many scattered leaves which can be collected, and the book of those doctrines thus reconstructed entirely. In that vast book, the capital letters are temples, and the sentences are cities, punctuated with obelisks and by the Sphinx.
He's just such a great writer, isn't he? Wow.
Yes, it's fabulous.
Beautiful. So the footnote references the fact that the Emerald Tablet contains all magic in a single page. Could you read that, please?
Yeah, the legend concerning the Emerald Tablet is that of, it was found by Alexander the Great in the tomb of Hermes, which was hidden by the priests of Egypt in the depths of the Great Pyramid of Giza, supposed to have been written by Hermes on a large plate of emerald by means of a pointed diamond. Wow.
Yeah, it's, you have to wonder, did it physically exist, or was it written in etheric substance, which would make it impermeable, and that the emerald is a metaphor. But, I don't question the possibility that it could have existed as an actual physical tablet. It's a way of grounding these truths all the way down to the physical plane to actually write them. Any thoughts about this? Great quote from Eliphas Levi.
Mhm.
Interesting, he when he's talking about this transmutation of fire, right? That light can be applied as a lever, a universal dissolvent, interestingly, not solvent, and as a means of, as a formative and coagulant agent. In other words, it can also bring together disparate substances, right? It's just such advanced metaphysics, that's being described here. Alrighty, but onward. Oh yeah, this is, I just couldn't resist. This is an illustration having nothing to do with reality, of course. Nonetheless, it has the reverence of age, being 1606 or earlier. The Emerald Tablet from Heinrich Kunrath's book, Amphitheatrum Sapiente Turning. Kind of beautiful, really.
Ishtar says Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma qualities.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the ultimate thrice great Hermes, right? Is the if you look at the descriptions of the higher initiations in DK, they're ever more inclusive. At first you master a single ray, and then you're mastering groups of rays, until finally you master all 7 at once in their interrelationship. So yes, I think that really is the ultimate triplicity, right? The sum total, truly, let's see here. Okay. Where am I here? Okay. The rest of this paragraph describes the incredible hubris of the early Christians, who grudgingly admitted that, quote, Hermes exhibited many symptoms of intelligence. Can you imagine? Okay. But we won't get into Christian bashing. Well, just a little bit. And that's not, by the way, any current Christian belief. This is a certain early Christian kind of misuse of the first ray, where they basically try to wipe out everything except their own doctrine in order to bring that forth. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Yvonne, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. In his Stromata, Clement of Alexandria, one of the few chroniclers of pagan lore whose writings have been preserved to this age, gives practically all the information that is known concerning the original 42 books of Hermes and the importance with which these books were regarded by both the temporal and spiritual powers of Egypt. Clement describes one of the ceremonial processions as follows. For the Egyptians pursue a philosophy of their own. This is principally shown by their sacred ceremonial. For first advances the singer, bearing some one of the symbols of music, for they say that he must learn 2 of the books of Hermes, the one of which contains the hymns of the gods, the second's the regulation for the king's life. And after the singer advances the astrologer, with a horologe in his hand and a palm, the symbols of astrology. He must have the astrological books of Hermes, which are 4 in number, always in his mouth. Of these, one is about the order of the fixed stars that are visible, the other about the conjunctions and luminous appearances of the sun and moon, and the rest respecting their risings. Next in order advances the sacred scribe, with wings on his head, and in his hand a book and a roll in which were writing ink and the reed with which they write.
Thank you. So horloge here is just a timepiece. That's all it means. Okay, first up. In his Stromata, Clement of Alexandria, one of the few chroniclers of pagan lore whose writings have been preserved to this age, gives practically all the information that is known concerning the original 42 books of Hermes. Stromata means miscellanies. You may remember that it was Clement of Alexandria who was vehemently opposed to any and all mystery schools, saying, "And now, for it is time, I will prove their orgies to be full of imposture and quackery. And if you have been initiated, you will laugh all the more at these fables of yours which have been held in honor." In other writings, he calls all but Christian thinkers barbaric philosophers. Nonetheless, in the Stromata, quoted by MPH, he gives us details of an Egyptian sacred ceremony that would have otherwise been lost. And it's the height of irony that it's St. Clement of Alexandria that we know these details, instead of somebody who was a follower of those teachings. So can we get a reader for this passage?
Okay, first though, we got a couple of comments from before. Tia says recognition that he had achieved a high level of synthesis, pure spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And then Efrosini says, we can see a similarity of the name of the Pymander, which means man shepherd, with the good shepherd of the gospel.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Good observations, both. Thank you.
Okay, Martha, can you read that for us, please?
Quote, "There is a particle of truth in the statement of Clement of Alexandria that the Egyptians had 42 sacred writings by Hermes, Thoth. And insofar as these texts, which include geographical and medical works, among others, constitute the entire range of material available for the education of priests, the reference to Thoth's authorship is based on ancient tradition. The figure 42 probably stems from the number of Egyptian nomes and thus conveys the notion of completeness."
Yeah, and in fact, 42 was in Egyptian teachings the number of completion. You see it. It's the number of the amentes, for instance. Let's see what I have here. So I agree with Moritz that the number 42 was symbolic. Not only 42 nomes or territories, and that would have been not random, but a number that of completion applied to the total of Egypt. And as I mentioned, the 42 assessors in Amenti. So we'll use.
Okay. Hold on a minute. We're getting some feedback. Martha, I'm going to mute you. Efrosini says the work of Clement is titled Stromatius, patchwork, not stromata, because it deals with such a variety of matters.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a correction, from MPH's writings. So thank you for that. Stromatia. Wow, that's thanks so much for these types of corrections. That's really great to know. Okay, anyone else?
No, that's all I see right now.
Okay. So we're going to use Clement's description of the procession, which is here, to introduce various aspects of ancient Egyptian culture. So we'll be using this as points of departure. First, first advances the singer, bearing some one of the symbols of music. Here's a painting of just such a procession from a tomb in the Valley of the Kings, and another from the tomb of a goods inspector. Archaeologists have found evidence of singer priestesses associated with different temples, such as the singer priestess Merisamun, who lived in Thebes around 800 BC. Can we get a reader for this? Kind of interesting.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify. Scott says the difference is singular versus plural in Latin between the stromates and stromata.
Stromatias and stromata. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good to know. Yeah, if you, okay. Interesting. All right. Thank you.
Okay. And Karen, can you read that for us, please?
The brief inscription on Merisumen's coffin states that she was a singer in the interior of the temple of Amun at Karnak. She, along with other women from elite families, served in the temple, playing music for the god as the priests laid offerings and purifications before the deity. We know from other sources that singers like Merisamun were probably trained by their mothers, and often several generations of women from a single family worked as temple singers. In Merisamun's era, women held the post of singer inside the temple, although men played instruments in rituals held outside the temple. Her title, singer in the interior of the temple, indicates that she had a level of purity that allowed her to enter the most sacred part of the god's complex. Two musical instruments were especially associated with musicians inside the temple. A sistrum is a type of rattle that produces a clanging metallic sound. The other instrument, called a mena, is a beaded necklace that was shaken to produce a swishing sound. When accompanying the god in processions outside the temple, musicians like Merisamun would have played a wider range of instruments like harps and clapsticks that were used as castanets. Although we do not know what ancient Egyptian music sounded like, there was no system of musical notation until a much later period. The lyrics of the songs are preserved, giving the impression of lyric song rather than simple chanting. From an article in Archaeology magazine by Emily Teeter.
Thank you. Who was the name of that temple dancer? I'm sorry, I tried to pull her up, but I couldn't remember her name. That used to come to the conferences. Do you remember, BL? Remember she trained at any rate, she trained
Right, from South America.
What's it?
I thought so. Maybe not, but
she might have been from South America. I think she was, but she trained in India in a temple in the south of India for a very long time. And what in conversations, and also she described this in her introduction before she danced, that it wasn't about, first of all, it's not all about entertainment. And my point is, neither was Mara Suman's singing about entertainment in any sense of the word. It was invocative, the dancing, and I would assume the singing, and that this would have been a very high esoteric art. When I watched this woman dance, and I'm really mad that I can't think of her name. When I watched her dance, it really raised the vibration in the room. It was a powerful experience. It was a level of precise movement like you don't see in any kind of normal dancing. They were almost like a series of full body mudras. You know what a mudra is, where you have your hands in a specific position to relay a certain vibration or quality of vibration. And it was like a series of mudras that she was permeating the audience with. So I'm hypothesizing that the singers of this time, of this, especially in the interior of the temple at Karnak, that they would have been, it's a lost art for sure, and they would have been able to invoke through their use of sound that which was needed for the ceremonies that were, that the priests then initiated, right? So, for instance, if there was an acolyte present, he was going to be initiated, then this singer would call forth that vibration or that presence, that was needed for that ceremony. So that's completely unverified. I'm just thinking that's, my take on probably what singer in the interior of the temple would indicate. Okay.
Francis?
Yeah.
Ishtar says Indian Katha is sacred temple dance.
Yeah.
And
example of it.
Oh, sorry. And Yvonne says that the singing is like the Gregorian chant.
Yeah, except for I don't put as much esoteric stock in Gregorian chants as I do in this form of singing that's described here. I think they set a very solemn mood, and perhaps more than just the mood, that they were evocative to a certain extent. But I don't think that it was at the level of what is being described here. It's just my opinion.
And then Ishtar says there's a book on ancient Egyptian dances showing dance movements which depict shimmies, backbends, dance moves still done today in Egypt in social dance.
Yeah, of course, social dance is going to have a different emphasis, but it could be, it could carry in it a movement blinds for something that was at one time evocative.
Jeremy says there is remarkable footage in meetings, this is in quotes, meetings with remarkable men of Egyptian ritual dancing.
Of course, it would be reconstituted. That is, somebody through the imagination bringing it back forth, bringing it back to life, but it's not going to be what was then practiced. That's going to be secret information, and it's a lost art, most certainly.
Ishtar says the author of the book she was talking about is Irina Luxova.
Okay.
And Yvonne says, does that coffin look Native American?
Yeah, well,
I think she means the mummy or whatever, sarcophagus. Yeah.
Um, to me, there's a quality of the Alaskan art, Alaskan Native American, the Tlingits in this look, but it's pure Egyptian. It's beautifully preserved. You don't see this much, you know, especially the white. It's extraordinary. Okay, any other thoughts about this? Fascinating subject, isn't it? Okay. See, the other thing is that both of these instruments are not really musical in the direct sense of the word. That is, they don't so much create tonality as they do a kind of percussion, you know, especially this minot. And it suggests like it may have well been used to purify the atmosphere before the intoning of the you know, of the singers. It's hard to know.
Scott's got his hand up.
Yo.
Go ahead, Scott.
I've not heard of the Minot necklace being used in this way, so that's pretty interesting. But it's normally portrayed being worn around the neck, and the large piece to the left is the counterweight that hangs down behind on the back. But you often see that on women or priests, whatever, wearing that particular necklace.
Now, that's interesting. It could be a kind of hidden badge of someone who is able to do that kind of evocative.
Yeah, some level of like you say, a badge, some level of proficiency or
Yeah,
of some sort.
yeah. Not just you know. Again, if you're thinking decorative, you're missing the point here. You know, not that there wasn't, you know, decorative arts in ancient Egypt, certainly, but in terms of anything that has to do with the priestly efforts, you know, then it has a much more powerful meaning. And they had Egyptian magic was of a great potency, you know. So I think you're looking at, you know, two instruments used for that purpose. Okay, next up.
Hold on. You got a couple more comments that just came in. Ishtar says that rhythm is a spiritual quality that represents the law of cycles.
Yes, yes, indeed. Right, there's a direct connection. You can literally recreate the sense of the cycle through, especially percussion instruments, and also the connection to Native American. If anybody's been to, I live in New Mexico, so we have it going on here all the time, that all the Native American dances are driven by drumming, and it's not entertaining drumming. It's metric. It just taps out the meter, right? And often is very particular kind of chanting that is not particularly musical to the Western ear at all. And it sounds to me, has always sounded to me when I've gone to these ceremonies, as very evocative. And the mood set is not one of celebration as much as one of ceremony, of invocation, especially at certain pueblos, like the Taos Pueblo, you know, where no cameras allowed at all. And it's a sacred mood is kept throughout, right? So, okay. Anyone else?
And then, yes, Tia says the fact that certain temple singers derived from a specific female lineage is also deeply meaningful on a number of levels.
Yeah, I agree. It says here that you know, women from elite families, and of course the elite is going to have to do with kind of like the Brahmins in the Hindu tradition, that the eliteness comes from their spiritual orientation, not from, you know, their popularity in the outer world, right? So it would suggest, at the highest level castes, this is my opinion, that the highest caste attracts, in the old days, I don't know about it anymore, attracts incarnations into it, right? So that certain souls would incarnate in a caste, and because they're evolved and have these qualities that allow them to, to become heirs, for instance, to this kind of abilities, right? Really amazing to think about this. Anyone else?
Yes, Tia says exactly. And then Ishtar says, even in inner hearing, there is rhythm. It happens in a regular wave-like timing.
No,
And,
good.
and then Ishtar's got her hand up. So
Well, I want to comment to that too. Yeah, inner hearing ultimately, any outer performance is an attempt to replicate what comes through inner hearing, because if you're able to, in fact, I would think that such a one as this Marasamun is actually listening as much as she's singing. I'm actually really glad you said that, because it reveals another layer here, which is that her inner attentiveness and listening, she becomes like a modern translator, from one language to another, that she's literally singing what she's hearing with her inner ear as a way of aligning with the higher realms. Okay, next.
Ishtar, did you want to say something?
Yes, exactly, Francis. That lines up with the Vedas, where the ancient sages heard the sacred sounds that
Yes.
we know mantra today. So, but I thought this lovely book, you may be interested in the Ancient Egyptian Dances by Irina Lexova, because she translates the actual words from the tomb paintings. And in the temple, she puts the song, dance, and frankincense. So I'll just read the translation off the wall.
Okay.
In the Dendera temple of the goddess Hathor, we read, we beat the drum to her spirit. We dance to her grace. We raise her image up to the heavenly skies. She is the lady of Sistrum, mistress of jingling necklaces. Or she is the lady of cheers, mistress of dance, the lady of sistrum, the mistress of song, the lady of dance, the mistress of wreath making, the lady of beauty, the mistress of skipping. When both her eyes open, the sun and the moon, our hearts rejoice seeing the light. She is the lady of dance wreaths, the lady of intoxication. We dance to none, we cheer none but her spirit.
Wow.
And it's so funny because I have this book because I'm a dancer and I'm a retired belly dance teacher and performer. So from my perspective, my spiritual path has been meditation through dance.
Yeah.
I contact spirit through movement, rhythm, and music. And it is a conduit to reach the higher realms.
I don't doubt
it. It's meditation in motion.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd share that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and thanks for the reading. It's very moving, isn't it? It's just, wow.
Yes,
It
yes,
just
it
cuts
is.
to the chase. It's usually so spare and yet so powerful.
Yes, and I mean, you guys are all far more researched in diverse areas than me, but I only have this one book, and I thought I'd share it.
Sounds like a good one to have.
Yes, I thought you might like it.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so, well, great. I'm thrilled to have explored this to this extent. So, next, yeah, we're not
Sorry.
done, huh? Okay.
Oh, no. First off, let me start at the bottom. Tia says, Ishtar, can you put the title and author in the chat, please? again, I know you did before, but if you'll do it again, please. Efrosini says the instruments claimed in the Bible to have been played by the ancient Hebrews are all Egyptian instruments as established by Egyptian archaeology.
Wow. Yeah, well, I'm not surprised. So the tradition, there was a strong crossover in the early days of when the Hebrew religion was still receptive, I should say, right? Yeah.
And then Scott says the drumming, like chanting and dancing, like the dervishes, all produce a trance-like rhythm to transport one to higher states of consciousness.
Yeah, you'll find this in cultures throughout the world. If you go back far enough, and many of the current indigenous cultures still, use the same idea undiminished, from old times, in terms of what are seen as primitive instruments, but in fact, they're, rather than primitive, you could call them fundamental in terms of being able to invoke these presences. Okay, anyone else? All right, onward. So next up, the second book, Born Forth by the capital S singer. Wait a minute. Oh no. Next comes the astrologer representing 4 books. Okay. Wait a minute here. I'm off. Hang on. Let me get my ducks in a row. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I'm just correlating to the text. It would have been just such a priestess that sang the hymns of the gods in procession, right? But we more than covered that. Next, the second book, Born Forth. By the capital S singer, carried the quote, regulations for the king's life, suggesting that these regulations had something to do with music. Possibly they were themselves written as hymns or set to a musical meter. This is a, altogether different concept, that the regulations of the king's life were also carried by the singer. Just adding to the mystery there, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if these regulations, or which would, when you're talking about the king's life, you're talking about the pharaoh, and the whole purpose of the pharaoh is to be a conduit to Horus and the gods, to Ra, right? And so the regulations would have to do with this alignment, and so it's, it makes perfect sense that it would be the kind of singer that we've been describing that would put those regulations to song. And supposedly we live in a more advanced era. Okay, suggesting that these regulations have something to do with music. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry, we've got a couple of more comments. Ishtar says, yes, Scott, that is right. And as tradition in Egypt did a dance flicking hair. This was to cleanse energy, as hair has always been known to be antenna. It is why ancient peoples had long hair, because it's also an energy conduit.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
And then in reference to what you were just saying, Jan says suggesting healing or to keep the king well.
Yes, oh, definitely. I would say that would be part of it. All aspects that would encourage and strengthen the king's alignment with the higher beings, including his own wellness, right? Oh, and I want to make comment before that, the fact that these were women, that the receptive quality of women, the form aspect in the sense of being like the golden bowl, receptive of these higher vibrations. So it would be a natural, it would be natural for them to be, for women to be in this role as singers. Okay, down to this. So next up come the astrologers, representing 4 books. According to the ancient wisdom teachings, astrology predates all known civilizations being practiced, for instance, by the Atlanteans. After the deluge, it was reintroduced in India, Chaldea, and Egypt. So can we get a reader for this, please?
Yes. Andrea, can you read that for us, please?
Yep. Astrology was practiced among all the ancient nations. In Egypt, the book of astrology was borne reverentially in the religious processions, in which the few sacred animals were also carried as emblems of the equinoxes and solstices. The same science flourished among the Chaldeans and over the whole of Asia and Africa. When Alexander invaded India, the astrologers of the Oxtraces came to him to disclose the secrets of their science of heaven and the stars. The Brahmins, whom Apollonius consulted, taught him the secrets of astronomy with the ceremonies and prayers whereby to appease the gods and learn the future from the stars. Morals and Dogma 490.
Yeah. And next up, reader, please.
Jan, can you read that, please?
Sure. The Egyptians predicted future events, both relative to private occurrences and natural phenomena, of which purpose Diotrys tells us they took advantage of their skill and oh boy,
Arithmetical.
know that I should the word arithmetical calculations. This last being of the highest importance to them in the study of astrology. For the Egyptians most accurately observed the order and the movement of the stars, preserving their remarks on each for an incredible number of years. That studying having followed by them from the earliest times. They most carefully note the movements, revolutions, and positions of the planets, as well as the influences possessed by each upon the birth of animals, whether productive or good or evil. And they frequently foretell what is about to happen to mankind with the greatest accuracy, showing the failure and abundance of crops or the epidemic diseases about to befall men or cattle, and earthquakes, deluges, and the rising of comets, and all those phenomena, the knowledge of which appears impossible to vulgar comprehensions. They foresee by means of their long continued observations. It is indeed supposed that the Chaldeans of Babylon, being an ancient colony, arrived at their celebrity in astrology in consequence of what they derived from the priests of Egypt. The art of predicting future events, as practiced in the Greek temples, says Herodotus, came also from the Egyptians, and it is certain that they were the first people who established festivals, public assemblies, processions, and the proper mode of approaching or communing with the divinity. The manner of doing this depended on the object of the votary, and a proper offering was required for each service.
Thank you. And finally, can we get a reader?
Jeremy, can you read that, please?
Yes. In the Bejek, it is said, from one mother is the universe born. This beginning is universal in mythology. The great mother in her primordial phase was the abyss in space and the goddess of the seven stars in time. No superseded type was ever lost, and the mother as space and the domus did not pass away when time was established, but was continued in Nu, the Lady of Heaven and consort of Sub-Cronus. Heaven as the bringer forth was continued in the female figure arching over earth. In addition to this, the Egyptians portrayed the zodiac in human shape, and astrology has brought on a human-shaped zodiac founded on the female form. In this sign of the ram serves for the head, the bull for the neck and the throat, the twins for arms, the crab for the breast, lion for the heart and back, the virgin for the womb, the scales for the lumbar region, the scorpion for the groin, and the archer for the legs and thighs, the sea goat for the knees, and the waterers for the legs, and the fishes for the feet.
Thank you. Okay, so those are just examples of really reflections on Egyptian astrology. Just a taste.
Francis?
Yeah.
Sorry. I just want to say those are still the same regions we use for astrology and the rulerships of the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I recognize that. Yeah, indeed. Interesting. Okay, so finally, or next, I should say. Next in order advances the sacred scribe with wings on his head and in his hand a book and rule, in which were writing ink and the reed with which they write. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Tia, can you read that, please?
The typical Egyptian recorder and divine scribe was Mati by name, which denotes the truth, law, or justice in a dual form and phase. He is the recorder in the hall of the twin truth, the judgment place of the clothed and naked, or the righteous and the wicked. Thus, the gospel of Mati would be also the gospel of truth in this double aspect. The Natural Genesis, Volume 2, page 474.
Thank you. Okay, to finish the quote from the Stromata, wait a minute here. We'll turn to the page in the folio edition, of Secret Teachers of All Ages. So we've just turned a page, and we come to a new page. Could we get a reader for this? This is still the quote from the Stromata, this long quote.
And he must be acquainted with what are called hieroglyphics and know about cosmography and geography, the position of the sun and the moon, and about the 5 planets, also the description of Egypt and the chart of the Nile, and the description of the equipment of the priests and of the place consecrated to them, and about the measurements and the things in use in the sacred rites. Then the stole keeper follows those previously mentioned with the cubit of justice and the cup for libations. He is acquainted with all points called that relating to training and mesophaltic sacrificial. There are also 10 books which relate to the honor paid by them to their gods and containing the Egyptian worship, as that relating to sacrifices, first fruits, hymns, prayers, processions, festivals, and the like. And behind all walks the prophet, with the water vase carried openly in his arms, who is followed by those who carry the issue of loaves. He, as being the governor of the temple, learns the 10 books called heretic, and they contain all about the laws and the gods and the whole of the training of the priests. For the prophet is, among the Egyptians, also over the distribution of the revenues. There are then 42 books of Hermes, indispensably necessary, of which the 6 and 30 containing the whole philosophy of the Egyptians are learned by the aforementioned personages, and the other 6, which are medical, by the pastophoroi, the image bearers, treating of the structure of the body and of disease, and instruments and medicines, and about the eyes, and the last about women. Ishtar typed in there, Mark seems to be close to Libra, scales, Mati.
Is that a question or?
Yeah, it was it was from the previous page before.
Oh, I think it was wasn't it the center of the back that was connected with the scales?
Oh yeah, that could be.
Yeah, let's see. Where is that? Yeah.
I think it was.
Where did I have it?
I think it was further back.
Yeah, here it is. Scales for the lumbar region. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was, say again what he said?
It was Ishtar. She says, Mark seems to be close to Libra, the scales.
Mark?
Mati.
Oh, Ma'at. I see. Yeah, that's the name of the Egyptian goddess who's depicted here. Ma'at. Is that what she means?
No, she says Mati. Oh, she says she meant Mot. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Right. Yeah, you would. Yeah, as the kind of center, I could see that. Yeah, there is something of that balance in her nature. Okay, let's go back to where we were. All right. So, so this first long sentence describes the requirements for being a scribe, who did much more than just take dictation, being the scholars of ancient Egypt. And I think also, just like the singers, they were probably one of the requirements is that their intuition had been developed in order to be able to write down from higher sources. So here is a list of scribes' materials from Isha Schwaller de Lubitsch's Hairback. You might have heard of that. Could we get a reader for this? Just the things they had.
Scott, please.
Writing materials. A scribe's tools comprised palette, water cup, tablets, and papyrus scroll. The palette was a long, narrow, rectangular wooden tablet with a container for the reeds and 2 sockets for the cakes of black and red ink. The scribe wrote on papyrus, tablets of stuccoed wood, shards, pottery fragments, or limestone splinters, ostraca.
Yeah, okay. It's just a kind of an aside, but interesting. So next comes the stole keeper. A stole is a ceremonial shawl. Its keeper, the master of ceremony. Pedeutics is a name for the science of teaching. The cubit of Gestus was probably the royal cubit. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Karen, can you read that, please?
The oldest example of the so-called ceremonial cubits date back to the New Kingdom. In addition to their symbolism, they are distinguished from the more common cubit rods by the prestigious material used for their manufacture, stone or metal. Wood is more rarely used, and by the wealth of text and information that would appear to have been superfluous for ordinary measuring tools. No point has been more disputed than the exact measurement of the cubit, called in Egyptian ma, one of the long ends of which has always bedeviled or beveled.
Was
Beveled. Whoops.
hopefully not bedeviled, but definitely beveled.
Several of these have been found made of stone, wood, and other materials. There was a royal cubit, satin ma, of 7 palms and the whole equal to 525 millimeters. The ordinary cubit measured 6 palms and was employed in the construction of the monuments, manners and customs of the ancient Egyptians.
Okay, thank you. So the 10 books, now we're going on. The 10 books which guided the actions of the storekeeper dealt with all aspects of ceremonial activity, including ritual and sacrifice. And just notice, there were 2 books for the singer, 4 for the astrologer, and now we have 10 for this ceremonial activity. So it was a huge part of their orientation. Next, and behind all walks the prophet, with the water vase carried openly in his arms. During his lifetime, the prophet would almost certainly have been Hermes Trismegistus himself. The water vase would have symbolically carried the waters of life, as shown in this frieze depicting Thoth and Horus initiating a young pharaoh. We looked at this one last time. Here's another depiction of it. Next, who is followed by those who carry the issue of loaves. Loaves had a specific ceremonial meaning in Egyptian ritual. Can we get a reader for this?
Okay, hold on just one second. You have 2 comments here. Yvonne says, how many inches is a cubit?
Didn't we say 24? What did it say? Let's see what it said here. I'm thinking so the whole is equal to 525 millimeters. That's 52 centimeters. Maybe somebody could do a conversion of 52.5 centimeters.
I'm thinking of the one over there. No point has been more disputed than the exact measurement of the cubit.
Yeah, right. Right. But we do have these, to measure
Right.
these great royal cubits. But he does say here, there was a royal cubit of 7 palms, the whole equal 525 millimeters. So maybe somebody could do a millimeters to inches conversion. Of course, for you in Europe, you're already there with 52.5 centimeters, right?
And then Jeremy says, what do you think of the reference to Hermes in the writings of the Tibetan, which seem to imply that Hermes was the planetary bodhisattva preceding the Buddha and the Christ?
Yeah, I think what they have in common is this bringing forth of knowledge, the knowledge aspect to humanity. I really see a third aspect quality in Hermes Trismegistus. Later the Buddha and the Christ would bring forth, a tremendous emphasis on this second aspect of love, wisdom, wisdom on the Buddha side, more love for the Christ side. But that Hermes, it seems to me, through the introduction of is almost like an extant lord of civilization, right? And you can see some parallels there, with Mercury. Okay.
And then Andrea did the math. It's 20.69 inches.
Oh, okay. There you have it. Not 24 at all, but 20.69. All right. You have to wonder about that, though. Well, anyway, there you have it. But they did have, those examples to measure, and so there's probably something to that accuracy. Okay, so we're at this point, but we're going to stop, folks. We'll pick up right here next time. And I wanted to announce that I will be starting my webinar series on treatise on cosmic fire on the 24th of this month. Probably we still have to get this through management. That's what it's slated for, but it will be starting, and it will be a series much like this, where I introduce images and we go through it paragraph by paragraph, and then each sentence and attempt to shed light on the meaning of every aspect of it. Probably, just a few pages per webinar each time. And we'll be starting where Michael Robbins left off, which was right around page 7. Well, actually, I'm dropping back a couple of pages. We'll be starting on Division C on page 77 with the etheric body and prana, which is the focus. And so it'd be terrific, if you join us on that. You can find the links the same place you find these links on MortyFederation.com. And hopefully there will be a general email blast for this starting up. So before then, we'll have a Secret Doctrine webinar. Isn't that right? Don't we have? When's the next webinar?
The next Secret Doctrine webinar is 19 June
Okay, yeah.
at 7 p.m. GMT. And the next STOA is 3 July at 7
Right.
p.m. So
Okay, so everything's, on track.
on track, right.
Except for now, you'll have to add to your schedule. The 2nd and 4th, because I'm going to do this twice a month. Otherwise, it would take 400 years instead of just a mere 200 years to get through TCF. So we'll be doing it twice a month. There'll be an hour and 45 minutes. Like I said, it'll be much like these, readers and then discussion. And it'll be the 2nd and 4th Friday at 3 p.m. I believe that's not right. I know it's 11 a.m. local time, but that would make it 1 p.m. Eastern time. And what is that? 5 p.m. I believe. 5 p.m. Yeah, 5 p.m. GMT. So I hope you'll join us for that. But at any rate, we'll see you before then, and I'll announce it also at the Secret Doctrine webinar series. So, anything else you need to announce?
I think that's it for our announcements. So
okay, thank you all for showing up. Appreciate your attendance. We've been at this now for a while, but I think it's paying off. Thank you. See you next time.
goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.